Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today's build is an update to the Shadow Daggers that we've been running on the Bladedancer. Now, this got some heavy nerfs when 8.1 came out. The main thing was that Shadow Daggers no longer has the spell tag, so that changed its damage and reduced its damage by quite a bit, especially if you were running it with the Ruined Daggers, as all of the adaptive spell damage does not apply to it anymore. What's nice about this though is even though you lose some damage, it means we can now run it with dual swords and instead become more of a defensive tank because we can get to 100% glancing blow. It still stacks with the flat throwing and melee damage, so you can still build it to do good, decent damage. The other thing that changed with this build was that it was ran before by spamming Synchronized Strike. However, there was also a nerf to Synchronized Strike and how many shadows it was actually allowed to proc, and if you had it auto proc Shadow Cascade, it consumed a bunch of mana per shadow, so you were essentially only getting 1 mana back instead of 6. What this really meant was you just weren't going to be able to spam it in the new one, and the only update that I've seen done to this build so far was someone running it in low life, and I believe it was Cruxius, and they were doing it in a low life version. However, we were able to rework it, and although you will only be able to spawn 2 shadows with Synchronized Strike, you can actually spam Synchronized Strike non-stop. All you have to do is throw in an occasional shift if your mana does start to get to like the halfway point, but you only lose 1 or 2 mana per second, which means you can go 2 minutes straight of just spamming it and getting lots of damage. As you can see, we went through all of the bosses relatively quick, and it is just a movement spamming skill to where you can once again use Synchronized Strike to just keep going forward and forward every time it comes off of cooldown. So it's a speed runner through the echoes, you can dance around the bosses, and it does well in the arena, especially with that 100% glancing blow now. Alright, let's go ahead and get into the skills. For skills, I'm running Synchronized Strike, Shift, Shurikens, Smoke Bomb, and Shadow Cascade. We once again have the 5 S's. For Synchronized Strike, we have this set up so that it will auto use Shadow Cascade for you. It'll give shadows extra damage, it'll give you ward for consuming a shadow, and it has lots of mana efficiency. So we have 1 point in Growing Darkness to unlock the foreshadowing. We have 5 points in foreshadowing for 200% more shadow damage, 3 points in dynamics for some mana efficiency, 1 point in shadow rush for health gain on every shadow you create after you have used Synchronized Strike, which you'll be using it within 4 seconds of each other. You'll be using it almost every second if you're spamming it, so you get lots of health through this. 4 points in Coordinated Cuts for some Armor Shred effect and Armor Shred chance on hit. 1 point in Umbral Assassination for Shadow Dagger on hit. 4 points in Shadow Infusion, so that shadows that are consumed due to Synchronized Strike give you ward per shadow and increased area per shadow. And because we're not using a melee attack with Shadow Cascade anymore, we're doing the Shadow Daggers, you don't really see the increased area anymore as it's not using the melee attack. And then we have 1 point in Wave of Darkness so that you automatically have the shadows use Shadow Cascade when you use Synchronized Strike, and that's for shadows that already exist. On top of this, it consumes 5 mana per shadow consumed, whereas you get 6 mana per shadow consumed thanks to Shadow Cascade, so you only get 1 mana back now instead of what was 12 last patch. Then for Shift, we have Shift set up to proc a shadow to also use Shadow Cascade. This is how you can get a bunch of mana back, as since it's not Synchronized Strike, you don't use the 5 mana consumed per shadow. So this is a way for you to get some of your mana back really quickly if your mana does start to drop down. This also will proc Shurikens for you, so you get extra armor, and you get a lot of dodge and haste with this skill. So we have 2 points in Shadow Recuperation, 5 points in Sleight of Hand for those Shurikens, 4 points in Swift Recovery for mana gained on use. The skill only costs 16 mana, you get 16 mana, so it's not a loss of mana at all. 1 point in Shadow Slip, so you're invulnerable while shifting. 3 points in elusive, so you gain dodge for 1 second after shifting based on how much dexterity that you have. 3 points in momentum, so you gain haste for 1.5 seconds after shifting. 1 point in lasting presence to create 1 shadow after shifting, and 1 point in dancing shadows, so that all shadows that you currently have that are active after you have shifted will use Shadow Cascade. For Shurikens, we have this set up to pierce and spin around us and to give us armor per shuriken that's active. We have 3 points in alacrity for the attack speed, but this is just to unlock the thin shurikens, which we have 1 point in for extra shurikens. 1 point in blade shield, so they are now cast around you and last for 3 seconds. 3 points in bladed armor, so that you get 30% more armor per shuriken that you have active. 4 points in floating blades increases the duration by 60%, putting their duration from 3 seconds to almost 5 seconds. 4 points in abrasive arsenal gives all of your shurikens 200% physical res shred chance and poison res shred chance. And 4 points in ethereal blades give them 100% pierce chance, so they will continue to spin around you even if they hit enemies for the full duration. Then we have Smoke Bomb. Smoke Bomb is here to give you dust shrouds. It's kind of defensive for you. It'll slow enemies, armor shred enemies, give you some extra leech, and create shadows for you so that you can get your mana back from having to have cast it. We have 1 point in Shrouded in Darkness, so that you get a dust shroud each second, which gives you glancing blow, flat dodge rating, which all add up to make it to where you have 100% glancing blow. You'll usually be over that 100% glancing blow, and you'll have a lot of dodge so that you will basically almost never be hit. But when you are, you'll take 35% less damage thanks to that glancing blow. 4 points in rapid concealment reduces the time that it takes for you to get a stack of it, so you get them twice as often. 1 point in thick smoke to apply slow to enemies. 1 point in eroding fumes to apply armor shred to enemies. 2 points in lingering fumes so that smoke bomb lasts longer. 1 point in generosity so the starting area of smoke bomb is larger. 3 points in smoke blades so that you have more melee damage and throwing attack damage. Both of those are tags that are on the Shadow Daggers, so it increases your damage. You'll do more damage while actually in Smoke Bomb. 3 points in Blood Bandit, so you have more leech, and 4 points in Umbral Assault, so that you create a shadow every second, which you'll get mana back for if you use Shadow Cascade, or you'll get 1 mana back if you consume that shadow thanks to Synchronized Strike. Either way, it's some of the mana back for the cost of having Smoke Bomb be cast. And then we have Shadow Cascade, which is going to be your main damaging skill. Now we have the setup to proc the Shadow Dagger. So we have 2 points in Shadow Torrent, 1 point in Battle Trance, 1 point in Crushing Darkness, 1 point in Flow State, and then we have 4 points in Dagger Dance. So whenever Shadow Cascade is used either by you or a shadow, it now throws out 4 daggers. With 1 point in Porcupine's Wrath, it now throws 7 daggers, but you no longer have the melee circle AoE attack. And then with 1 point in Shadow Elegance, every dagger that's thrown now applies a Shadow Dagger. And the Shadow Dagger only needs 2 Shadow Daggers on an enemy for it to, what they say, plunge into the heart of the enemy and do a critical strike. So what that means is all of your shadows will each throw 7 daggers. Each dagger can hit an enemy, and with just 2 hits, you now get a Shadow Dagger instead of a dagger, and it will do a critical strike after 2 of them have landed on an enemy. It can take up to 4 of them if you have no Shadow Dagger effect. However, we put Shadow Dagger effect both on idols and on gear and got it down to 2, but as long as you get it down to 3 or 2, you'll notice that your damage picks up a lot. Then we also have 2 points in Rapid Expanse, 1 point in Precision, 1 point in Carnage, 2 points in Gloomstalker, so that whenever Shadow Cascade, which includes your Shadow Daggers, gets a kill, there's a chance for a shadow to be procced, and when that happens, that just basically means that when you consume it, it'll be more mana for you. 2 points in Fight in the Shadows, so that you gain 6 mana per shadow that is consumed. Now remember, you get 6 mana here, but Synchronized Strike consumes 5 mana, so you're really only getting 1 mana per shadow. and then 1 point in Onslaught, so that 25% of the mana cost of Shadow Cascade is refunded. However, that's only if you manually use it yourself. If you have it procced through a secondary skill where it doesn't even consume mana to begin with, your shadows don't consume this. It's not really a big deal to have it. Then for passives, I have 40 points in the Rogue base class, with 8 points in Steady Hand, 8 points in Guile, 8 points in Swift Assassin, 1 point in Twin Blade, 5 points in Evasion, 5 points in Agility, and 5 points in Dodge and Parry for that flat dodge rating and Glancing Blow chance. We have 0 points in the Marksman and 72 points in the Mastered Bladedancer, with 8 points in Cloak of Shadows, 1 point in Shroud of Dusk, and 5 points in Veil of Night, so that you have a chance to get Dust Shroud both when you are hit and when you do a melee attack and hit an enemy. 8 points in Once, 6 points in Sky Synthesis, 5 points in Blood Dance, 1 point in Flash of Steel, 8 points in Weapons of Choice. Now they got rid of the critical strike multiplier in here, which is why we're not using weapons to try and get that. We're instead doing 2 swords so that we get that 40% base Glancing Blow. 6 points in Asuvon's Pact, 5 points in Perfection, 5 points in Confidence, 3 points in Exuberance, 1 point in Critical Eye, 5 points in All In, and 5 points in Shadow Master. For items and idols, so we have a 1x4 on that has increased damage while wielding a dagger, which doesn't help us, but we do have some bleed on hit. You can run any 1x4 that you want. The most important thing is the 1x3 vertical stands that you have for the large shadow idols, and you want percentage increase daggers effect, and you want to get that on as many of them as you can. A suffix that you can get is percent damage increase by attacks used by shadows. This is like the best hybrid of an idol that you can get, and if you can get as many of those as possible, you can also get like health gained on dodge. You have very high dodge, so you can get lots of health that way, but getting as many of these hybrid ones is going to be the most damaging. The hybrid with the shadow dagger effect and the health gained on dodge is more of a defensive offensive hybrid mix. Then for weapons and for all gear, you can see we are not running any uniques. These are all crafted items. We're running dual deicide swords, and we have added melee physical damage, increased physical damage, increased dodge rating, and chance to shred armor on the main hand. On the offhand, same stats except we have chance to apply frailty on hit. Then for our crafted chest piece, we have Shadow Dagger effect and mana efficiency with Synchronized Strike. Now those two are going to be the most important things. You want to get those as high as possible and then work on the bottom half. Now you have plenty of dodge to boot, so we have increased dodge rating and flat dodge rating. Those are simply tier 2s. They're not something that you really have to build into hard. The more important thing is make sure you get the mana efficiency with Synchronized Strike. You want at least tier 3 with that, and then the Shadow Daggers effect, you gotta have tier 5 for that to get more damage out. If you only have tier 2 or tier 3 with it, you're not going to hit that threshold to reduce it down to 2 Shadow Daggers instead of 3 or 4 being needed to proc and plunge into the heart. So you definitely want to get as much of that as you can. Then for the helm, we have the same stats except physical resistance instead of increased dodge rating, but again, very important, Shadow Dagger effect and mana efficiency with Synchronized Strike. Try and get those ones as high as possible first, and then in the bottom you can do what you can to get the dodge rating and physical resistance up, or whatever else stats that you decide to go with. Then we're wearing a gold amulet. We have physical damage, physical penetration, health, and dodge rating. For the rings, we're wearing 2 gold rings. For the right gold ring, we have increased mana regen, throwing attack, physical damage, dodge rating, and physical resist. For the left ring, we have mana regen, throwing attack, physical damage, necrotic resist, and dodge rating. For the belt, we have physical damage, dodge on potion use, dodge rating, and flat dodge rating. We have the Crusader Gauntlets for some Void Resist. This comes with Dex, Mana Regen, Void Resist, and Flat Armor. The Heoborian Boots with increased move speed, Dex, Dodge, and increased Dodge. And then for our relic, we chose the Stolen Tithe, and that's because it gave us a percent of damage leech as health on hit, so that you can, since this is a high life build, leech is a very good thing. It also increased the total amount of damage leached from all sources as health. So you get a lot of leech with this idol, which is really nice. And then on it we have mana regen, dex, elemental resist, and flat health. For the character sheet, as you can see, we don't have cap resistances, but we do have quite a bit. We're a little low in poison and necrotic, but it's not horrible. And most of the poison is usually dots on the ground that you can dodge. We have 15% armor, but again, that will go up if I do one shift. You can see we jump up to 26% armor, and you'll stick much closer to that. For dodge, we have 56% base, but again, that will go up, especially like after you shift. You can see we jumped up to 83%, but as you also get stacks of perfection, that will go up as well. Both of these will, because you get flat armor and flat dodge. For our damages, you can see for physical damage, we're almost at 500%. We have 400% critical strike multiplier, and those two things are going to be the main tags for why you do so much damage, because the Shadow Daggers is a guaranteed critical strike hit. That's why we didn't build into critical strike chance at all with any of our gear, and we just wanted as much physical damage and flat physical damage as possible. And then for how to run this build, so as you can also see for our mana regen, we're at 16 mana regen, and that's pretty important for this build. You can get more than that. You can get up to like 18 if you have some like all tier 5 stats on the 4 items that roll mana regen, but on this one we just have 16. So the cost of Synchronized Strike is 23 mana, and it has a 1 second cooldown. That means that if we continue to spam it and we have a mana regeneration of 16 mana, that we're losing 6 mana per second. But we also have 2 shadows that it creates. So when we do this, we have 2 shadows, and because we get a positive 1 mana for every shadow that we consume, that's an additional 2 mana. So we actually are only losing 4 mana per second. If you can get your mana regen on gear all tier 5 stats and you have 18 or 19 mana per second, you can reduce that down to just 2 or 3 mana that you're losing per second, which is much better. However, because you're not usually spamming this every second, there's an animation cast speed, you're only losing a few mana every second instead of 5 or 6. You're actually only losing about 3 or 4. And as you can see here, after like 20 of them, we're still pretty high on mana. In fact, we're just a little bit shy. And if you stop for just a second, you're going to have that mana back. Or you can shift. And the reason that shifting will give you that mana back, so if we do this and we get kind of low on mana here, what we can do is, as you can see, my mana is slowly starting to drop. I can do a shift, and it's going to be all the way back to full. And the reason why is because when you shift, it uses Shadow Cascade, which isn't procced by the Synchronized Strike, so you get the full 6 mana back per shadow. So you just have to shift every once in a while when your mana does drop a little bit, and you're going to get 10 to 20 mana back. And then, of course, when you have Smoke Bomb active, you'll have more shadows coming in, so that always helps as well. And then how I set this build up to run it, I like to have Smoke Bomb on autocast, and that's it. So I'll put Smoke Bomb on autocast, and then all I care about is just basically holding down T and shifting whenever I need to, and that's all you do. You just keep bouncing around, and as you can see with our damage here, you're still critting for 50, 60, 70k damage. While in your Smoke Bomb, you can do 100,000 damage. We're getting a couple of 100,000 damage crits in there. Of course, last patch, this was obviously better because you had the spell tag so that it got more flat damage, and then you also had the ability to have 4 shadows being procced because mana wasn't such an issue, so there was twice as many daggers flying around. But this build still works. It still works extremely well, and you can still spam Synchronized Strike like this constantly. And if your mana, like I said, does start to get low, it's as simple as just throwing in a shift and your mana is right back to full, and you can just go back to spamming away. Alright, let's go ahead and get into some more gameplay.